What would happen if trees disappeared from the face of the earth? In that famous movie, Crazy Max, the heroine of the movie, Furiosa, faced difficulties to return to the green place, that green oasis full of trees after devastation and destruction spread throughout the world. When Furiosa reached the holy spot, she found nothing but dunes and dead tree trunks, and she let out a loud cry of pain, out of despair. Forests are life-sustaining, and perform exceptional and necessary functions that help us survive on Earth, says Meg Loman, director of the non-profit Tree Foundation in Florida. The functions of trees on planet Earth range from storing carbon and preserving soil to regulating the water cycle, supporting food systems, providing shelter for countless species of animals and birds, as well as building materials for humans. But people often deal with trees carelessly, cutting them down to reap economic benefits or because they hinder human-urban expansion. About 12,000 years ago, humans uprooted almost half of the world's trees, which are estimated to number about 5.8 trillion trees, according to a study published in the journal Nature. About 15 billion trees are cut down annually, especially in the tropics. Since the Industrial Revolution, the forest area has declined by 32%. In August, the number of fires in the Brazilian Amazon increased by 84% compared to the same period last year. Logging and burning of trees for land reclamation have increased in Indonesia and Madagascar. Although it is almost impossible for all trees to fall on the planet at once, except in the event of an unthinkable disaster. However, imagining this bleak picture of a world without trees, as in the movie Mad Max, may help us appreciate the scale of the disaster of losing trees. In the beginning, if trees suddenly disappeared, most of the biodiversity on the planet would be gone. The loss of the natural environment is the main driver of animal extinction around the world. Jamie Privdello, an environmental scientist at the University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, says, "The destruction of all forests would have catastrophic consequences for plants, animals, fungi, and more. There will be a mass extinction of all living things locally and globally." In 2018, Privdello and colleagues discovered that overall species richness levels were between 50 and 100% higher in areas with a lot of trees, compared to treeless areas. Scattered trees can attract biodiversity like a magnet, Privdello says, providing resources for different animals and plants to survive. The climate will change completely on the face of the planet in the event of disappearance of trees in the long and short term. Trees act as biological pumps in the water cycle, drawing water from the soil and releasing it into the atmosphere in the form of water vapor. Thus, forests contribute to the formation of clouds and precipitation. Trees may prevent flooding by trapping flowing water into lakes and rivers, and fend off storms and winds in coastal communities. Tree roots help hold soil in place, protect it from rain erosion, and provide shelter for microbial communities. And the lands from which the trees were uprooted will be more affected by severe droughts. Floods will increase, and soil erosion will affect the oceans and marine life. Many islands may sink after the trees that were holding the ocean's waters uprooted. Uprooting trees will lead to the sinking of large areas of land into the oceans, says Thomas Crowther, an environmental scientist at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. The trees also reduce the temperature of the weather in the areas where they grow. Trees shade the soil and maintain its temperature, and this darker part of the soil absorbs heat rather than reflecting it back. Trees use the energy from the sun's rays to turn water into steam. Therefore, the places where the trees were uprooted would immediately become warmer. In another study, Privodillo and colleagues observed that removing trees completely from an area of 25 square kilometers increased the temperature of the area from which they were removed by at least 2 degrees Celsius. Trees mitigate the effects of global warming caused by climate change, as they store carbon in their trunks and remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. A report published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change indicated that deforestation already contributes about 13% of total global carbon emissions, while changing land use patterns contributes about 23% of emissions. And the areas that become clear of trees will become a source of carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere, says Paolo De Giurico, professor of environmental sciences at the University of California. Over time, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere will double. And while young plants absorb carbon at a faster rate than trees, they also release it into the atmosphere at a faster rate. Within decades, these plants will not be able to withstand the effects of global warming. And when plants decay, huge amounts of carbon will be released into the atmosphere, and the Earth's temperature will rise at unprecedented rates, the likes of which we have not seen since the emergence of trees. Huge amounts of carbon would seep into the oceans and cause acidification to so much that they could wipe out all aquatic life except for jellyfish. Rising temperatures, disrupting the water cycle and losing shades will claim the lives of billions of people and livestock. Agricultural systems will also be disrupted, as crops that depend on the shade of trees, such as coffee, will decline, as well as crops that depend on birds and insects that carry pollen grains that live on trees. Land that was fertile in some areas will be destroyed by rising temperatures and changing rainfall patterns, while crops will grow in other areas that were not suitable for agriculture. The soil will deplete over time. The plant will not bear fruit without using large amounts of fertilizer. And temperatures will rise to the point where it is impossible to live and grow in most areas of the Earth's surface. As for the health repercussions, trees clean the air by absorbing pollutants and trapping fine particles in their leaves, branches, and trunks. Researchers from the U.S. Forest Service estimated the amount of pollutants removed by trees from the air at about 17.4 million tons annually in the United States alone. De Giurico says that we may see outbreaks of some rare or new diseases transmitted from animals that we did not approach before. He and his team noticed that Ebola was transmitted to humans in areas where the forests of the animals had shrunk. If forests suddenly disappeared, we would be more susceptible to zoonotic diseases, such as Ebola, Nipah virus and West Nile virus, as well as mosquito-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue. Numerous studies have revealed the benefits of trees and nature for our mental health. The New York State Department of Environmental Protection recommends walking in the woods to improve overall health, reduce stress, raise energy levels, and overcome insomnia. Trees also help patients recover, as a 1984 study indicated that nature contributes to accelerating patients' recovery after surgery. Other studies have demonstrated that spending time among grasses and trees reduces ADHD symptoms in children, and that green spaces improve children's performance in schools. Even many genius writers, scientists and inventors, in many nationalities, link their childhood to a rural upbringing. Among the strangest studies, a study indicated that an increase in the number of trees by 10% was accompanied by a 12% decrease in the crime rate in Baltimore. Trees have played a prominent role in many pagan and heavenly religions since the dawn of history. As Buddha reached the state of enlightenment after sitting under a tree for 49 days, Hindus worship at the sacred fig tree. As well as Christ. In both the Noble Quran and the Bible, it is mentioned that his mother, Mary, gave birth to him under a fruitful tree. Rather, the Quran indicated in one of its verses, that the stars glorify God in the sky, while those who do that on earth also are trees. He was saying that the trees on the earth are like the stars in the sky. The koan also referred to the meaning of eternity, and the eternal kingdom, as a tree. Even more than this, as the koan also indicated that the parable of a good word and an evil word is like a good tree and an evil one. Likewise, the Prophet Muhammad, in a famous hadith, urged people to plant trees, when he said, "Whoever among you has a seedling in his hand, let him plant it, even if the sun comes out from the west," referring to the day of resurrection. All of this points to the importance of trees and green matter on this planet, and the extent to which they are related to spiritual meanings, positive energies, and the instinct that God created the universe on. Finally, and on the other hand, whoever cuts down trees or destroys them is in some way working against nature, against God's will, and those assets that God created on earth.